Alright, I'm gonna try this again. Welcome to Catholics Committed. Today we're going to talk about the Christian origins of secular holidays. We're not going to talk about all of the holidays because this video would be 30 minutes long and none of you would finish it. So we're going to talk about 3 in particular. We're going to go over Christmas, we're going to go over Valentine's Day, and we're going to go over Halloween. Let's get started. First of all, starting with Christmas, we're not going to do the entire tradition of Christmas. For example, why we celebrate it in December or anything like that. We're going to talk specifically about the tradition of the Christmas tree and where that came from. So, the tradition of the Christmas tree starts with Saint Boniface, who was a bishop during the year 722, thereabouts. And it starts out where he's invited by these pagan druids to go and visit one of their rituals, one of their little fabulous pagan get-togethers. And he goes, and this priest is about to sacrifice this young boy. And Boniface is not going to stand by and watch this kid get murdered for a god that doesn't exist. And these people, they were worshiping Norse gods specifically. So we've got like Thor and Odin and these guys, which as a Marvel fan is kind of a cool deal, which means that Haley from behind the camera is going to be sad when she realizes Thor's the bad guy. He does not want this kid to be killed for these false gods. And so he takes and he stops this murder. He stops this priest from sacrificing this boy. And they have a tree there. It's this humongous oak tree that's revered as Thor's tree. It is Thor's oak tree, and it's a reverent place. It's a sacred place, like the Holy Land would be to us. That's what this tree meant to these people. And he had just committed a sacrilege in their eyes. He just stopped a blood sacrifice, which was a big deal. It would be like shooting up a mass for us. And so he has to prove that their gods are not real. And so he goes and he starts to chop down this tree. And all of these people are expecting that lightning and thunder are going to come from the sky and smite him from the earth for the sacrilege that he is committing. But nothing happens. He cuts the entire tree down. The tree of Thor falls. And so do their gods. Their gods are nothing. Their gods mean nothing. But behind this oak tree that he's cutting down, there's this fir tree, this small fir tree that's growing up. And he looks to the people and he says, look at this tree. Look at how it points to God. And he talks about it and he uses this tree as a symbol of the Trinity. You have the 3 points of the tree in the triangle formation, which is the best symbol that we use to describe the Trinity. And so he uses the same image, the same imagery that they had been using with a tree to describe the Christian God, to describe the true God. So he didn't destroy their culture, he used it to convert them. And he did, he converted them by destroying their God, by showing that their God was not real. And by giving them an example of the true God, he converted them. And so that's where the tradition of the Christmas tree originated from. Now we're going to go into Valentine's Day. When we celebrate Valentine's Day, it's chocolates and flowers and roses, and that's how we celebrate it. But where did it come from? Valentine's Day is actually a saint's feast day, Saint Valentine's, who was a priest, who was a Catholic priest. And he is the patron saint of love, happily married couples, and youth. This is kind of interesting because he ends up being martyred, so it's kind of weird that we celebrate his martyrdom with chocolates and flowers. But let's get into it a little bit more. Valentine's was a priest during an era when Christianity was illegal. There was still the Roman Empire, and we still had all the emperors that are hunting down Christians and wanting to kill them. And so he is working in the background, working in the shadows, keeping Christians faithful and alive. And one of the biggest things that he did is he would marry young Christian couples that were in hiding, and he would keep all these Christians safe and keep them alive in their faith. And so he eventually gets imprisoned. And after he gets imprisoned, he's sent to the emperor himself, Emperor Claudius. And he'd been able to convert a lot of Roman people. He'd escaped imprisonment before, and he used it, but he escaped imprisonment by converting those people who had imprisoned him. And he continues on, and he eventually gets imprisoned by the emperor himself. And he decides, I've converted all these people before, why not try the emperor? And so he does, except the emperor doesn't react the same way that everyone else does, and he gets enraged, and he kills Valentine's. He makes him a martyr for the faith. That's where the celebration of Valentine's Day comes from, is we celebrate him for his ministry to the youth and to the Christians who wanted to live out their lives, who wanted to live out their faith in a time where that was very difficult. The next one that we're going to go over is Halloween. Now, it is true that Halloween actually originated from a Celtic Druid festival, which was called the Samhain. This was a festival of the dead. It's where they would dress up as ghosts, as witches, and they would take on the dead. They would take on the afterlife in their Druid form, in their pagan form. But when Christians came into the Celtic culture, when Christians started to come and bring conversion into these people's lives, they didn't want to totally decimate the culture that these people had. They didn't want to destroy it. And so they did this thing where they would baptize certain festivals, certain parties. You see that all the time in cultures today. You'll see it in Mexico with the Day of the Dead. It's a Christian celebration when originally it was part of Mexico before Catholicism ever showed up on the scene. But now it is celebrated as a Christian festival, as a Christian celebration, because of how Christianity came and brought that and was able to influence the culture, not destroy it. The same was happening here with Halloween. When they came into this place where the Druids and the pagans were thriving and they had this festival, they just brought in and started celebrating it the way that Christians celebrate death, the way that we celebrate it, because we celebrate All Saints' Day, the Feast of All Souls' Day, on the last day of October, which is actually when this festival for the Druids took place. And so they took and they brought in Christian beliefs on death. They brought in Christian beliefs on the afterlife. They celebrated the saints. They celebrated the souls that had gone to heaven and that had gone on to eternal life in the Christian truth of the meaning. And so they never destroyed the culture. They preserved it, but they also made it into a Christian resemblance. They brought in Christian influences. They didn't destroy the culture, they just made it Christian. Because if they tried to destroy a culture altogether, they would never get any converts. They would never get anyone to see the truth. And so they simply changed it. They simply brought in the Christian beliefs and showed them that yes, they're celebrating a form of afterlife, but it's this one that's actually the truth. And that's where Halloween comes from. Though we celebrate it very differently today by dressing up as our favorite fictional characters and going around and binge eating candy, that's where it comes from originally, is the celebration of all saints and all souls. And it's really a celebration of conversion, to be honest, because we're taking cultures, we're taking people with different opinions, with different lifestyles, and we're bringing them together in the faith.